Good morning everyone, I am Jacqueline Jaime and today I'll be discussing about my assigned topic, which is the outcomes assessment phases in the instructional cycle. As you can see the image on your screen, there are 11 phases in the instructional cycle. It starts with institutional vision and mission. Next to it are program goals, subject objectives, desired learning outcomes, diagnostic assessment, deciding on lesson focus, supporting students' activities, formative assessment outcomes, review or teach, mastery learning, and lastly, summative assessment of outcomes. And all of these phases will be tackled about today. But before that, let me share to you the definition of assessment. Assessment in education refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. Now, let's begin to discuss the phases in the instructional cycle. Phase 1 or the institutional vision and mission. Vision statement or institutional vision is a public declaration that schools or other educational institutions use to describe their high-level objectives for the future or what they hope to achieve if they successfully fulfill their organizational purpose or mission. A vision statement may describe a school's loftiest ideals, its core organizational values, its long-term objectives, or what it hopes its students will learn or be capable of doing after completing. On the other hand, mission statement or institutional mission is a public assertion used to describe the institution purpose and major organizational commitments, what they do and why they do it. A mission statement may describe a school day-to-day operational values or its public commitments to its students and the community. Examples of it is our very own CCSA school vision and mission. Now let's proceed to the phase 2 or the program goals. Program goals describe what you want a program to do or accomplish. They are broad statements of the kinds of learning we hope students will achieve. Examples of it are graduates will be competent in critical questioning and analysis. Next, graduates will have an appreciation of the necessity and difficulty of making ethical choices. And lastly, graduates will have the ability to design and conduct experiments as well as analyze and interpret data. Next is phase 3, or we can call as the subject objectives. These are the brief statements that describes what students will be expected to learn by the end of school year, course, lesson, project, or class period. Examples of it is the lesson is all about distinguishing and constructing various paper pencil tests. And by the end of the lesson, students should be able to first, construct a table of specifications, and lastly, construct paper pencil tests in accordance with the guidelines in the test construction. Now let's proceed to the phase 4, or we can call as desired learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are statements that describe significant and essential learning that learners have achieved and can reliably demonstrate at the end of a course or a program. In other words, learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of a course or a program. Example in an activity, a lecture on organization strategies. Its learning outcomes is learners can demonstrate how they will use organizational strategies with actionable steps. Next is phase 5 or diagnostic assessment. A diagnostic assessment is a form of pre-assessment where teachers can evaluate students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills before their instruction. The diagnostic assessment is a tool for teachers to better understand what students already know about a topic when submitted before the start of a course. Examples of it are pre-tests, journals, performance tasks, and word splash. Next is phase 6 or deciding on lesson focus. In this phase, it is the time when the teacher is demonstrating modeling, and sharing his or her thinking with the students. It is a brief discussion that lasts for about 5 to 15 minutes. It is also the time when a teacher uses the student's attention to introduce the concept, skill, or strategy they are to learn. Next is Phase 7, or supporting students' activities. In this phase, it is a strategic part of the teacher on how to create a supportive environment for students for them to be actively involved in class. Example: students apply principles of logical thinking and persuasive argument. And here are the ways or examples to support your students. First, forming opinion about the topic. Second, researching and writing about variety of perspectives. Third, adapting the style to identify objects. And lastly, employing clear argument in writing. Now let's proceed to Phase 8, or we can call as the formative assessment outcomes. Formative assessment refers to the wide varieties of methods that teachers use to conduct in-process evaluation students' comprehension, learning needs, and progress during a lesson, unit, or course. The goal of formative assessment is to monitor students' learning, to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching, and by students to improve their learning. Example is a metacognition table. At the end of the class, each student answered the following questions presented to them in an index card. Like what we do in class, why we do it, why did I learn today, how can I apply it, and what questions do I have about it. Next is Phase 9, or review or reteach. Review and reteach are two very different methods of helping your students retain information, but they are not interchangeable. Review is what most teachers do the day or week after a large test. You go over a large of amounts of information, and students ask questions on things that always been a little bit tricky for them. It's about reawakening the brain to things that it may have forgotten in time. Review is about remembering, not relearning. While reteach is a different. Its target is to a specific objective that will struggle for students. Reteach requires you to constantly have your finger on the pulse of your classroom, finding misunderstanding and fixing them before they become a large-scale problems. Next, Phase 10, or mastery learning. Mastery learning, or initially called learning for mastery, or also known as mastery-based learning, is an instructional strategy in educational philosophy, first formally proposed by Benjamin Bloom in 1968. Mastery learning maintains that students must achieve a level of mastery in a prerequisite knowledge before moving forward to learn subsequent information. If a student does not achieve mastery on the test, they are given additional support in learning and reviewing the information and then tested again. This cycle continues until the learner accomplishes mastery, and then may have moved on to the next page. And lastly, Phase 11, or summative assessment of outcomes. Summative assessment, or summative evaluation, refers to the assessment of participants where the focus is the outcome of a program. These contrast with formative assessment, which summarizes the participants' development in a particular time. Examples of it are midterm exam and final project. And that would be all. Thank you for listening, and God bless.